Main differences between spiritual awakening and societal awakening. My name is Eileen. I'm a soul empowerment coach, a healer, and a therapist, and a spiritual business strategist. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people sometimes get confused around is when we talk about awakening and what awakening really means. Now, there can be many layers to, for example, spiritual awakening, and there can also be different interpretations and different views within that, because that can mean different things to different people, from a spiritual perspective and even a cultural perspective, and sometimes a religious perspective. But when we look at societal awakening is when the individual and the society, a collective, or a certain amount of that collective, start to wake up to things that they never saw before. And it's a certain amount of unveiling. Now, we can go through a life sometimes completely oblivious to certain things that are not on our personal radar for whatever reason. And that can be because the way that we live in life. It can also be because sometimes we don't like to go and look at certain things or take self-responsibility for certain things. And I'm going to give you some examples. So most countries around the world have started to have a huge shift in the dynamics in relation to political agenda, and lots of things has happened, particularly over the last 4 years. And there's been a lot of unrest in many even Western countries where there's never been this, there's been not that unrest for many, many years, sometimes centuries. And what we're seeing at the moment is that the individual and the collective are starting to open their eyes to things that sometimes they didn't even want to look at because they believed it wasn't their responsibility. But also there's elements of starting to get relief that things that people are quite shocked about. But a lot of the revealing, some of it is like the analogy of when you put a frog in boiling water. I'll explain. So if you put a frog, like anything, if you put it in directly into like boiling water, really hot water, it's going to jump out. But if you put that frog and you slowly and slowly adjust it gets used to something. So in some level, part of the collective has get used to a lot of things that are not right, that are really at a soul level so misaligned with as an individual, a spiritual level. It goes against all values. But because they have slowly adjusted, they've used a lot of gaslighting, they've used a lot of psychological warfare and manipulation, that some of it for some people has become normalized. Now, I'm not saying the whole thing. There is people are unsettled to different degrees, but there is some people that are like that frog, right? They have get used to things being a certain level of corruption or certain distortions or things not quite right, but it's become normalized. And sometimes, sadly, you see that in children. When we're adults and we've lived in life and we maybe have a certain level of wisdom or insight and see things from a bigger picture, sometimes we, if things start changing in society that we know are maybe not quite or maybe distorted, there's a sense of, well, it's not normal or that's not quite right because of maybe the previous condition of the way we look at things and our maturity. But sometimes children who are very easily manipulated in conditions, even teenagers, when they are like that frog being slightly manipulated and adjusted in the temperature, things become normalized. Now, we have a bit of that going on, but we also have the vast amount of the population now starting to people, and it's almost rising. We saw over the last few years that many people were their consciousness was keeping them at their head in the sand and in denial and not seeing things. But we're seeing now that in most countries there's a certain it's went over that threshold that now at some level most people are aware there's a lot of things going on that are not right, and they're starting to question things. So what we're having is basically a societal awakening. People that were fast asleep and unconscious to what really was going on at certain levels are starting to awaken. Now, everybody can be at different levels of that awakening, and they can awaken to certain things that's going on, maybe in certain areas, maybe sometimes what you find is that people are already switched on in certain areas, so it's easier for them to wake up in certain areas of their life because of maybe their own roles that they've did in life, things they've maybe already saw. It may be their life experiences, it may be just the information they're given. It's easier for them to process, and it's almost like things are starting to make sense. And then there's other areas that we can struggle to awaken for because it's so heinous, or it has a personal link to our own circumstances. It may be too painful to look at it, or it may, by looking at that, it has some personal consequence, and maybe actions we've already taken that we were naive about. And that's where we have mass amount of people in society at the moment that are starting to waken up. But like any type of unveiling, there's different layers to it, and people will still see in that awakening and that unveiling things through their own eyes, through their own journey. For example, if you take someone who is a police officer who deals with some of the most heinous crimes and people, maybe like child abuse, sex trafficking and things, they will tend to be less naive about and see things maybe from a bigger picture than what some of us who've maybe, people who've never really understood what sex trafficking is and thinks it's something that happens on a really small scale. And then you've got other things and other subjects that are sometimes easier or more palatable, or again, because of your role or the work that you did, right? Or clients that you dealt with. One of the things that happens when you're in the healing field, coaching and therapy field, if you've worked with lots and lots of clients for many, many years, you can look at the world very differently when you listen to what some people have experienced. And sometimes you hear things that sometimes really make you question reality and question what is going on in the world. And we all have different aspects that become awakened more easier than others. And we also have blind spots and things that we don't want to believe because it's just too much. So as we're supporting other people through their societal awakening, it's important to understand that. As a business owner, if you're someone that is running a more spiritual business, one of the challenges that a lot of, for example, healers at the moment, and even coaches and therapists are having at the moment, is that in their awakening, they're very highly evolved and they know that their work is really shifting, and their work is supporting the awakened work, the awakened, and it could be everybody can be helping people at different levels. But they sometimes feel guilty or feel a bit kind of uneasy because who their clients were before, or the people they spoke to before, it no longer aligns with their work. Their mission is to take things a step forward because they've transitioned at a certain level. Even the way that they're talking, they're speaking, what they're talking about is that a certain audience are not ready for that, and they're no longer resonating, and they're in resistance. Now, the challenge is when you grow spiritually and societal, you've got to be very careful, particularly if you're highly empathic and highly sensitive, that other people don't want to try and pull you away from your path, maybe unintentionally, unconsciously, but they want you to serve them in the way that you served them before, or you're no longer a fit and they feel really uncomfortable and they're jarred by that. That's their problem, right? That's their issue. When people are not ready to grow themselves or evolve, they will sometimes do manipulative things, particularly very subtle manipulative things, to try and hijack you to be more palatable for them because they're uncomfortable with where you're going. And they may not understand that, and that can be hard. One of the biggest things with either a spiritual or a societal awakening is that societal awakening is just like a spiritual awakening. Other people may not understand you at that point. Sometimes people think you're crazy, you're nuts. And we know what some of the terms that are going about, but one of the things, as if we look at some of the things that a lot of us have said over 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of things people cannot hide away from anymore, even though we know that a lot of things are starting to happen in many countries, as in Scotland. There's big censorship bills that a lot of people think on the surface that there is for certain reasons, but if you look actually into it, there's a bigger agenda there, and there's a much really darker and deeper agenda. And it's all about control. It's all about stopping people speak up and speak out about things that are going to be pushed as a particular agenda. And this is all to stop. It's all about control and controlling the masses and manipulating the masses to a certain agenda that is going to, how could you say, benefit certain people, few people, a certain lot of people, by this way that they want to push where the world goes and their agenda. And some of it's very unpleasant, and that is part of the societal awakening. Now, when you go through a societal awakening, just like a spiritual awakening, there can be all aspects, and a societal awakening definitely does challenge people at a soul level. And if they can, it's the dark night of the soul. So this is where spiritual awakening can often happen for people when they start awakening at a societal level. Now, some people have already had, you find a lot of light workers, healers, therapists, and coaches already have had some sort of spiritual awakening. Now, my own belief is that spiritual awakenings come to different degree. I've worked as a healer for over 30 years. I started studying healing over 30 years. I started using my skills in that then. And also, more importantly than that was the amount of people that I worked with, and I went and I get help and teachers I studied with. And one of the things when you work with all different types of teachers, and you also the client of many people, you can see how people have different levels of consciousness with different areas in their gifts and their awareness, and how some people have really powerful, extreme spiritual awakenings where it's like an instant where suddenly they wake up to lots of things on a spiritual level, have a really deep, profound spiritual experience that evolves them quite dramatically. But most of us, it's maybe small bursts of experiences that open the doors. And for a lot of people, it's a mixture actually of that kind of societal awakening. It can be a personal awakening to things that's going on in society that opens that up and makes you awake. But it's the aspects of the spiritual awakening that gives us strength, courage, and power. Now, to have spiritual awakening, sometimes we have no control in the aspect of that. I believe it's almost like God or the universe has this, they choose certain things to happen, and we all are here with a different life purpose and path. And other people sometimes don't understand that, and they can judge your life. I know that I've had a lot of that, where a lot of people judge circumstances and judged certain things. But I'm now learning more and more about how certain things happened in my life, and certain things, and where I was protected at certain times in my life. I was put aside almost and put into protection. I had certain life experiences that made me be able to see things from a wider perspective and help other healers, coaches, and therapists in a way that I couldn't if I hadn't had all those experiences. And you are the same. Now, every single one of you is watching this video will be at a different stage of their spiritual awakening and societal awakening. And some people are kind of very spiritually awoke in some areas, but they actually have very little awareness of what's going on a societal level. And they kind of slip up because on a spiritual level, there is things that they've not looked at. And this is when people don't do shadow work or don't really do the inner work. Now, there's all sorts of things that people can do for inner work, for example, right? But there is some things that work at a more really deep spiritual level. And one of the things I believe is, like, for example, there's lots of different types of meditation you can do, right? There's lots of different strategies, and there's things that can make it a lot easier for people to get really soul connected and really heart connected. But like everything, it takes commitment and discipline. And if you don't have the discipline or commitment, sometimes you're only scratching the surface all the time in your work. Now, I've been a disciplined meditator for 30 years, so a lot of things becomes easy, but I made that commitment, right? Because one of the things that I saw early on in my own life was so many things that felt so misaligned and didn't feel right. And so, being someone who was highly sensitive and highly empathic both, the world felt so distorted, and a lot of things, I would say most of what was going on in the world, it wasn't just that it was wrong or right, it didn't feel aligned with my soul, and it didn't feel like truth, right? And it was almost that my soul wanted me to forge my own path that was very different. And a lot of you will know what I'm talking about. And it's it's the road less traveled. And I've done a lot of things, even in the healing and spiritual sector, because my soul felt that this is where and I was fortunate to have a father who always told us to follow our gut, right? I took it to a different level in a different way. But what I did was in that area, particularly to do with maybe work, purpose, and certain things. Now, sometimes I made mistakes to do my own healing journey. I gave other people power over certain things that would convince me that they could help me, and they had a certain level of skill and knowledge in certain areas. And sometimes, and a lot of times, what they didn't really have. There's some people, of course, I mean, a lot of wonderful people that supported me and helped me in certain ways. But like what we see a lot in the spiritual and holistic industry, a lot of people implying a lot of things and making very bold claims which they don't back up. And in those situations, I gave a lot of power, and I also get people who were constantly following me or trying to kind of felt like stalking me to be their client and convince me that certain things would definitely help. And then it was interesting when I started working with them, then they would look at things completely different as they saw the bigger picture. and saw different things. They made a lot of presumptions. And what I realised is that everyone has their own view of things and can look through everything with their own rose-tinted glasses, or tinted glasses with their rose, or maybe something else. And the biggest thing that we can do in our own life is build a deeper connection within ourselves and God and light and the universe, and that, you know, that light element. Because no matter what goes on in your life, sometimes you'll reach situations in life, particularly to do with societal awakening and spiritual awakening, that those around you may not understand. And most light workers who are very awakened have had these experiences where they've had to go things very alone. I went through experiences that no one else around them actually can understand and may disagree with them, because at that point they don't understand what the person is going through. And sometimes it's not till later on in your life the jigsaw starts to, it's like almost the pieces all start to go together and you see the bigger picture. Now, I had a lot of things going on energetically and psychically, which was mind blowing after I had sepsis. And one of the things that it made me look at life completely different. It made me look at energy and all sorts of elements, and I went a path seeking answers. And there were some people that made me look at things completely different, and it was very interesting. And I started saying things that maybe most people and most healers couldn't say. There was some healers, and there was a lot of really top healers that taught about these things, but it took me a while to get the right people. But one of the things that it prepared me for was a lot of the spiritual and energetic war that's going on at the moment, because we're in a spiritual war. And anyone that is a healer at all, who's an awakened healer, knows exactly what's going on in the energies and what is going on at a spiritual level and what we're actually battling. People that are not awakened don't understand that, because they're not at that. It's like some people are almost like they don't want to look up the next level. They're too scared. They're frightened what they'll say. And that's like the societal aspect. Many people hide their head in the sand and they think they can't face what they need to look at. But the reality is, no matter how painful it is, once you look through something and you face something, it frees you. It frees you psychologically, energetically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because when you can, it's like a child. When a child cannot face the dark, or a child has to push through uncomfortable stages in their growth, if they do not push through that, they become stunted mentally, emotionally, even physically, and even spiritually. There's a psychological, they're held back. But when they break through that fear, like breaking through their fear of riding a bike or going to school and being brave, when they break through that, they have more power, they have more energy. And at a spiritual level, the more that we can work on our spiritual awakening and our spiritual strength and courage, we have power. You feel a power to push you through. You have a power that guides you every day, and it's so strong that it doesn't matter what other people think, because you know that this is what you're guided on your mission. It's a light, it's very light, but it's strong and powerful, right? And you often just get these intuitive nudges that are very strong and firm that pushes you. Now, the more that you do that work, you become guided towards information and the right people that are going to support you in your journey and is going to help you with your awakening. But often what happens, their ego, even if you look at the archetype from an archetypal perspective, people's wounding in their ego keep them stuck from waking on a societal level and waking at a spiritual level. So in some way they're frightened of their power. I know for me, I've had to work through a lot of religious wounding, which has put me in real fear and trauma, and work through a lot of wounding around being the rescuer and the martyr, right? And also having to work through wanting to shake and wake up my fellow healers and light workers who I assumed would be able to be aware enough and awake enough of what's going on, but who seem to want to hide their head in the sand. It kind of frustrates me. And I'm triggered because I want to rescue them. I want to martyr them. I don't want them. I want them to be empowered, and I want them to be able to move through with us all. Now, societal awakening is not easy. And I thank God that on one level, I think my societal awakening started very young, because I was exposed to a lot of things just to do with my own well-being, of how crazy society was, how crazy the medical system was, how people didn't question things, and how much people didn't really take responsibility for the actions that they took. I saw that element, and I saw how crazy that it was that, for example, dentists were putting mercury in people's teeth, and also there could be, well, obviously I got more than in my tooth, how people could be putting really highly toxic radioactive material in people's body and think that that was okay, right? When actually the reality was there was a lot of other things out there that were far safe, but it was all to do with money. And that's just, that's only scratching the surface. And from an archetypal perspective, we all have our wounds, we all have our blind spots. And like the rebel archetype, a lot of rebel archetypes are stepping forward as truth seekers at the moment. And I mean, I have to take the hat off. A lot of them are really pushing through and standing up and being the rebel, and they don't care at a time where we do need the rebel archetypes. The only problem is the imbalanced rebel archetype, if it's not get its spiritual awakening and it only has its societal awakening, it's on self-destruct because it's fueled by anger, it's fueled by their own wounding, and it's not balanced. It's not coming from the sovereignty as a rebel. A sovereign rebel knows its power, knows where that it is a sovereign being, and where it's entitled in society and its value, and it breaks through all barriers and it destroys. It's the same as the rebel can be like the destroyer archetype. And the destroyer archetype in its power helps eliminate and destroy old ideas and helps break down old ideas that are an old fragments that are keeping people small and distorted and in unhealthy situations. The destroyer helps break people free from that, and its light form, it helps people break free from the old cages that they're held in and they can't even see. It's almost like they're in a cage and they can't see it. And that's what humanity has been, like in a cage, like a bird cage or any type of cage, and it can't see it. Now, the wounding, obviously, it's like the rebel without a cause, or they're so in there, they're fueled by their anger, their frustration, and they can't see sense, and they look at everything as this black and white, that can be the element. Now, there's lots of different types of archetypes that are playing out at the moment. And some of the archetypes that are kind of suffering a little bit more just because of their whole values in life is, if you look at the jester archetype, that can sometimes be the entertainer. But if we look at it from a jester archetype perspective, the jester is likes to everything to be fun and likes to put on a happy face and party and everything. And often the jester archetypes are hiding behind a mask. A lot of jester archetypes do have, sometimes they can have maybe manic or kind of depression, and they're always wanting to make other people happy and make everyone life is so family, because life, they want everybody to feel happy and have a party and enjoy themselves. And they often get, form those archetypes and even do those sort of archetypal work in their business and whatever, come across like that when they've had a lot of wound in themselves, where they've not been happy, where they didn't have they feel there was a lot of fun in their life, maybe in their childhood, and playful, so they might have been very serious, so they try and bring that into life. Now, a lot of them are really, really struggling because they've not faced the shadow element of that part. And they have to then, at societal awakening, look at, they're having to face some of maybe their biggest fears and look at the dark, and they're having to look at the, the mask that's been hidden. We also see that sometimes with the innocent archetype is also an archetype that really struggles with societal awakening, because the innocent archetype is all about purity and divinity. Now, the innocent archetype can be often the light worker, what we call the love and light workers, who only focus on the light and the love, which of course it's really powerful, but in their own day-to-day life, in their own, even their work, they don't look at the shadow elements. They don't face the shadow. They choose not to face. And it's not about focusing and putting all your energy in the dark. That's not what it's about. It's about, someone getting into the dark thinking that everything's light and and saying, "Oh, I'll be fine," but they don't have a torch with them. They're not prepared, right? And it's like the Pollyanna syndrome, where everything is positive and they can create. But a lot of people have found themselves, particularly, we've seen this in a lot of people who can be great manifestors, who've really struggled through the last 4 years to do awakening, because what happened in society did not fit their narrative of what they thought could happen, and to do the way that the beliefs and the conditioning that they believed and how they project things. And a lot of people, I've saw this, a lot of people who are very into law of attraction have really struggled with a lot of things that started to happen in society and life, and because they don't understand deeper elements of law of attraction and manifestation, and they don't seem to understand spiritual laws. And a lot of things come to the surface when we look at societal awakening. The reason that things are coming to the surface, there is all to heal and to see, because if we cannot see what's broken and dark and wrong in the world, we cannot fix it. We can't move beyond. And it's like someone that lacks really a lot of awareness does not see sometimes the damage they do to other people. I see that sometimes with therapists and coaches, very naive and very often young. Therapists and coaches are people that just don't have, they're not maybe extremely empathic or extremely sensitive. They just don't have the same level of awareness sometimes as other natural healers and therapists. So they go into situations and they're rather clumsy and say things that sometimes can be extremely damaging and really naive, because they don't have a certain level of awareness. They live in their own wee world, right? And that's the reality. A lot of archetypes that live in their own wee world. Even if you look at the hermit archetype who chooses to remove themselves from the world, and they're removing themselves just to protect themselves, but don't want to take self-responsibility for their own actions or their own inactions or what they're sending out. They're struggling as well. Now, I'm not saying the hermit archetype can also be very useful in times like this, because we often have to sometimes retreat and reserve our energies and whatever to work on what we need to work on. But some people that completely hermitize themselves from life then don't have a clue what's going on, and they don't evolve because they're hidden, they're choosing to hide themselves away, right? Now, if we go to spiritual awakening, the more that you surrender and say, "Allow me to be your light, allow me to be a light worker," because on one level, a lot of healers, for example, have this egoic view of what a light worker is. I'm a light worker, and this is and that's very egoic, right? And I'm not saying we need the ego for certain things, but what I mean is that lots of people in the world are light workers, different types of light workers. Now, often, obviously, when I refer to light workers, and certain things I'm talking about more your healers or therapists because that's my audience. But if we look at there's people who are going out and doing really hard jobs in relation to societal awakening, or even people, if you think about souls, people that are doing jobs that none of us would want to do. They're doing things because they're guided at a light level and they think that they can make a difference and put themselves in a job that maybe nobody else could do, right? And I believe in every job in all sorts of elements of society, there are light workers in different elements of society because they're the people that matter what they're in and what role they've chose to go in there for some aspect and they've been guided at a light level, right? They're the ones that just know that they're there to do something. Now, the light workers' role is that they know that they're here for a deeper mission, right? And they're here to make a difference. And the key here is that it doesn't, a true light worker is not about focusing on the masses and how many you can shift, right? Sometimes that can come from an egoic perspective. It's about you fulfilling the mission that you're supposed to do, not from the head, but from the heart and the soul. Now, even if you make a difference in one person's life and do what your mission was here, because think about it, some of the most powerful people in the world, the only reason they were able to do their mission was because of somebody else in their life that had an impact. And it could have been one person that said something that had that butterfly effect. And spiritual awakening is about us moving forward in our lives. It's about us moving forward in a soul aligned way and being spiritually led and something that's coming up through us. And the more that we ask, and one of the things that I do, right, and I think this is one of the reasons why I've been guided to so much information and could see things from a wider perspective quite early on, was I surrender and ask. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to do this. I ask, use me as you will to be guided, to fulfill my mission, to do what I'm here to do. Now, that can mean that a lot of people maybe not understand what I'm doing. I can get a lot of criticism, or I can, have all sorts of things. Sometimes people also triggers their own wounding and they're thinking, well, who does she think she is? But that is not my problem. My problem, I'm like a lot of people when they reach their 50s, you get to a stage in your life and you know that you are here for some reason and you can only do what your best. And the more that you can ask what you're here to do, the more power that you have. So remember, there is two differences between spiritual awakening, societal awakening. Have compassion and empathy for yourself. Understand that we are all unique, right? And we're all at different spaces. The more that you do the work, the more that you truly are willing to surrender, things get easier. And if you need support in any of these areas, please get in touch, because one of the things that I'm pushing towards is more spiritual support sessions. So remember, we're all different, but societal awakening is very different than spiritual awakening, and you need both to be balanced and to move forward and be the light worker. You're not going to be able to help your clients that are awakened if you're not awakened and they're coming to you with challenges in relation to some of the things that's going on and you don't really understand that or you don't believe that. And obviously we're all here for different roles, but it's important to remember that, okay? Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and remember, shine your light, be the light, step up. And even if it's just baby steps that you step up, that's okay. And also, when you need that time to recoup, restore, you do it. And it's one of the things that I've been doing a lot more recently. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.